What's going on, Neon Nation, and welcome back to the Neon Arcade for some more Cyberpunk 2077 news. Today we're going over some new Funko Pop releases, one of which gives some insight into a new major character in the world of Cyberpunk, a great article discussing the complexities of past CD PROJEKT RED titles, and contrasting this with current news of a Cyberpunk delay, some big rumors from the quote-unquote Polish Jason Schreier, some new Cyberpunk Red developments in the form of new art, Cyberpunk multiplayer, and much more. Starting off today's episode, we have some Cyberpunk 2077 Funko Pops officially being announced at the London Toy Fair by Funko in collaboration with CD PROJEKT Red. We've been discussing the possibility of these Funko Pops due to just how widespread Cyberpunk 2077's product licensing seems to be, as well as Funko's overall popularity, so this really comes at no surprise. The official image they showed includes two male V figurines, one which glows in the dark and both retracting the nanowire cable from their arms, two of Johnny Silverhand, as well as one female V statue sporting the mantis blades. Now there was another image of a Cyberpunk 2077 Funko Pop which we have yet to hear about. This character's name is Takamura. I hadn't heard about this guy from the lore, so I asked the lore expert herself, the MadQueen, if she'd heard about him, and she didn't, so this is likely a new character for Cyberpunk 2077, or that will be featured first in the tabletop Cyberpunk Red. My first assumption about this character is he is most definitely from Arasaka, since Arasaka employees wear all black, as well as the obvious in his name being Japanese. He looks somewhat similar to the Arasaka employee being ran over in the CE statue, but the eye augmentations and facial hair do differ between the two. Regardless, he seems to be an important character, otherwise he wouldn't be a Funko Pop. Anyways, if you guys are into these, pre-orders are available and there are a ton of other products being listed for this franchise. Expect much more in the future, but here are some I have yet to mention. Also, as a side note, the changes for the release for all Cyberpunk products will likely all shift to coincide with the release. Next, we have a rumor I wanted to mention coming from Boris Niuspolak, who is apparently as renowned as Jason Schreier in Poland. I want to preamble this part of the video with the fact that these are currently rumors and should be taken with a huge grain of salt. These were posted via a user who translated the podcast featuring Boris from Polish to English in the SSS League Discord server. There's one point in particular I really wanted to address out of all of them, as it aligns with recent delay statements. The rumor in question is that the biggest of Cyberpunk 2077's technical problems are being caused by the first version of the Xbox One from 2013, and that if these problems weren't solved by January, there would be a delay. Obviously there was a delay, so the issue may be the original Xbox, although there is a parallel rumor from this podcast mentioning that Cyberpunk at GDC 2019 had no way of running properly on current gen overall. This was my first gut instinct when we learned via CD PROJEKT Red's teleconference that technical issues were the reason for the delay straight from CDPR. I think the major challenge at the studio is going to be figuring out how to make it run without hiccups on the current base models of current gen consoles. Anecdotally, I was at a buddy's house last weekend kicking back, having some brews, and playing some split screen Fortnite on his original PS4, and even then we had freezing issues. I don't play on console often, but it really reminded me of just how limited the original console tech for this generation really is. It is a little bit worrisome for Cyberpunk since the NPC density is sky high, there's a lot of ambient hustle and bustle, and a lot of sources of light for the engine to render shadows and different looks to different surfaces. There were other rumors via the translation, including Siri being the main character for a CDPR game in the future that was supposed to be exclusive to Sony, which kinda makes no sense to me judging by how close the studio is to Microsoft and their presence at Microsoft conferences, that Cyberpunk's main story is shorter than The Witcher 3's but is satisfying on the second or third runs, and that the main storyline is finished but side missions are still being added. Again, just to reiterate, these are rumors. Next, we have an article from GamesRadar analyzing the Cyberpunk 2077 delay. In the article, they mention that due to the scale, density, and seamless world building CD PROJEKT Red is attempting to immerse the player in, the delay was just inevitable. Quest designer Patrick Mills likens the Quest developmental process to trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but the pieces of the puzzle keep changing shape as you place more of them in. He's mentioned in the past it's a lot of work and revision. We all know that The Witcher 3 went through a couple delays, and Cyberpunk 2077 looks substantially more complex in not only its vertical expansive world, but also its gameplay approach. As further insight into the developmental processes of The Witcher 3, Mills mentioned that, quote, "There was a mission in The Witcher 3 where you were supposed to ride a horse and attack somebody from it, but it didn't work at the time because horse riding hadn't been implemented into the game. Since horse riding didn't work, you definitely couldn't fight on the back of the horse. We knew we were going to get it, but we didn't know when, so we had to go through a lot of work to just fake doing that. Work can't be halted just because certain features are still in development." He goes on to say that, quote, "That could take us 2 weeks to do, and then when you eventually get the system, in an ideal situation, you would just take your thing out and put the new thing in. It never works that way. What happens is you take your thing out and you put the new thing in, and then a dozen other things break because they relied on that big thing that you would put in. That goes right up until the end of the project, and even in patch processes, you're constantly tweaking things." Now that's just one standout feature in a myriad of complex things from The Witcher 3. Add in fluid character choices, being able to tackle quests in different ways, a reactive dialogue system, and much more, and it's likely a QA nightmare. Next up, we have this brilliant new art piece that will be featured in the full release of Cyberpunk Red, a tabletop preamble to Cyberpunk 2077's story that will take place in the 2030s and 40s and will offer more insight into the lore as well as an updated rule set to play this tabletop RPG that 2077 is based on. This particular piece is made by Santiago Betancourt, and I have to say it is my favorite piece from Red so far. If you're looking at this piece and wondering why the aesthetics between Red and 2077 don't necessarily align, even though they are within the same timeline, media ambassador of Artal Saurian, Jay Gray clarifies that, quote, "Part of it involves a time period difference, and part of it involves showing off not just Night City, but parts of the entire world." Next up, we have Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer news. Now in the last video regarding the delay and a teleconference with investors by CDPR about the delay, I made mention of how CD PROJEKT RED clarified that the next AAA RPG that they were making is actually codenamed Cyberpunk Online and will be the Cyberpunk multiplayer experience. I wanted to come back and address it because we have been speculating for a long time that CD PROJEKT RED was doing 3 Cyberpunk projects, and now we have confirmation of this. We have the standalone single-player story-driven RPG coming September 17th, we have the DLCs and expansions that will be coming post-launch, and now we have what will likely be a standalone Cyberpunk Online game. It's still classified as a AAA RPG, so that just goes to show that this will be an online mode with RPG elements in it, likely using assets from 2077. Now originally this was scheduled for 2021, like previously mentioned, but with the delay of Cyberpunk 2077, Cyberpunk Online will likely now have a release date of 2022 at the earliest. The more I think about Online and it being this big AAA RPG project and not just an additional game mode slapped on a 2077, the more genuinely excited I become about this. This has the potential to be massive. Finally, we have this replica Johnny Silverhand arm from GameStop. Again, this is releasing down the line, but here's a picture if you guys were interested in that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and for more Cyberpunk, join Neon Nation by subscribing to the Neon Arcade.